Welcome to The Long Haul, the podcast dedicated to empowering small carriers and owner-operators to drive their business forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, bringing you insights from industry leaders, real-world success stories, and strategies to help you navigate the road to profitability. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your fleet to the next level, this is a show where trucking meets opportunity. So buckle up, it's time to go the distance. All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Long Haul. Obviously, you know our focus is to really provide you with those tangible insights, bring some real conversations and things that can impact you as an owner-operator, as a small fleet owner. We want to make sure that we provide you with as much information as possible. Today, I'm super excited to have a conversation with a young man that has joined me on today. He's the visionary co-founder of CEO of CloudTrucks. Born in Nigeria, he embarked on an impressive academic journey, earning degrees from Penn State University and Johns Hopkins University. His entrepreneurial spirit led him to co-found Scotty Labs, which was a company that was focused on remote vehicle control, and it was later acquired by DoorDash. In 2019, Tobenna launched CloudTrucks, which is a groundbreaking platform designed to empower trucking entrepreneurs by really just simplifying operations and maximizing revenue. Under his leadership, CloudTrucks has experienced remarkable growth, offering innovative solutions tailored for owner-operators and small fleets. Everybody, I am super excited to be joined by Tobenna Arodiogbu with CloudTrucks. Welcome to the show today, Tobenna.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Man, I'm super excited for having you, man. Good to see you again as well, man. We connected several months ago and really had the opportunity of really sharing some insight, but I'm glad to be able to get you on here because today we're going to really talk about just the lease-on model and the owner-operator model as a whole. So before we get started, Tobenna, I want to walk back a little bit, okay? I want you to talk about your journey from Nigeria to leading a really tech-driven trucking company. How did that journey come about, and why trucking, man? Why trucking?
Yeah. So a little bit about my background. So like you said, born and raised in Nigeria. And my parents are entrepreneurs. They own a manufacturing business in Nigeria. I worked at that business. It's like a soap factory. So I worked there when I was younger before I actually moved out here. And I moved out to the US because I was really inspired by a lot of people that I had read about, a lot of tech entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs in general. I had been to the US a number of times as a kid, and it was like this magical place to me. I'd actually gone to Disney World, so really it was a magical place to me. And after I graduated college, I ended up moving out to San Francisco because, again, I was just like driven by these people that I would read about who were building amazing companies in technology, and I wanted to go and work for one of these companies and learn as much as possible. And after working at a number of tech startups, I worked at one that was building HR software. I worked at another that was building real estate software. I was really inspired to tackle a really large problem. That's kind of what I was focused on. Like, what are some of the biggest problems that I could work on? I wanted to work on a problem that wasn't faced by other people who were around me in San Francisco. I wanted to work on problems for real Americans. And trucking was something that I was drawn to because I'd read a lot of things about it in 2015 and 2014. If you think about manufacturing and trucking are very closely tied. So I'd been around trucks my entire life. And I remember I read this article. I think it was a Wall Street Journal article in like 2015 or 2016. It was about this idea of truck driver shortage. That was actually the thing that first drove me to kind of work on trucking. And back then there was Convoy. I think Uber Freight hadn't quite started, but they had been doing the autonomous trucking stuff, I think, with Auto. And that's really kind of what inspired me to work on trucking and try to learn about the problems that were being faced in the trucking industry. The remote operations company that you talk about, Scotty Labs, it was actually focused on trucking as well. It just so happened that we ended up having DoorDash as a customer, and DoorDash ended up acquiring the company. But the focus there was also trucking, and I was really exposed to a lot of truck drivers and learning more and more about the problems, and that's kind of what led to CloudTrucks.
So you have a really, really extensive background in just the manufacturing piece of just being exposed entrepreneurial. So that's part of the spirit is the entrepreneurial spirit. You know, you got interested in trucking, we read the article, say, hey, you know what? Here's a problem. Here's a niche opportunity for you to solve. What gave you that, hey, you know what? Cloud trucks, that's it. What gave you that light bulb moment that, hey, I'm gonna create this specific solution and really put it to scale?
Yeah, so starting first of all with Scotty Labs, right? If you believed in 2016 that there was a truck driver shortage, then the natural thing to work on was, well, how do I make trucking an easier job, right? So that's what Scotty Labs was focused on. How do I make driving as easy as possible? And every time I talked to trucking companies back then, and I talked to some truck drivers, some of what I was hearing was, I want to be able to be home when I want to be, right? Like I don't like being on the road so much. I have a family. I want to make it back home to my family. So that's what led to Scotty Labs. While I was working on Scotty Labs, though, I started talking to a different audience. So with the first time where I was talking to trucking companies, but when I started working on Scotty Labs, I started spending a lot of time talking to truck drivers and then owner operators. And there was this thing that I kind of noticed. The owner operators that I talked to were struggling with managing their business, and everything that they talked about were like classic business management problems, right? How do I think about compliance? How do I negotiate with brokers? How do I find shipper freight? How do I handle insurance costs that were rising? And then every time I talked to truck drivers who were company employees, they would talk about how to become owner operators, right? Because they saw that as their path to freedom. So, they still wanted to determine when they went home, but what they were really saying was, I want to be able to be on the road for 3 weeks at a time and then take a week off or 2 weeks off. Or, for some people, I want to be home every single weekend. For some people, I want to be home every night. But working for a trucking company and being a company driver, you didn't really have that freedom to operate the way you wanted to, right? So the idea at the time was, all right, well, if we make it easier to operate a trucking business, then more owner operators would be successful doing operating their trucking business. More company drivers would become owner operators. And if you kind of play this forward, going into the future, more younger people would be willing to go into trucking as like, this great middle class job that they can use to build a home and feed their family and all of that, right? So that's really where the idea came from. And I realized that there was this model, this owner operator model that could allow us to do so. And that's how we decided to build CloudTrucks.
You know, the thing that I love about what your journey as a CEO of a company is you are extremely boots on the ground. Like, you know, you're the type of person get out. I'm having conversations. I'm doing my own market analysis, and I'm not just doing a market analysis of picking up a paper, but I'm going out and I'm having conversations with people and seeing what the biggest problem is. And you started Cloud Trucks 2019. You took a full year almost before you said, "Hey, I'm going to bring on our first driver." What was the thought process behind it? Obviously, we know development takes time when it comes down to tech, but were there anything that was in that timeline that you were saying, "Hey, I want to pause this thing before I make it public. Here's what I was working on."
Yeah, so it took about 9 months or so before we brought on the first driver. In those 9 months, there were a number of things that we were doing. So the first thing was, when we started, I didn't necessarily think that we needed to be the carrier. We wanted to figure out like what's the right model, how do we provide a true solution, like that was my main thing. It has to be a true solution to the drivers. And we played around with the idea of just providing technology, but we felt like that wouldn't really solve the problem. And then we went down the path of setting up our own authority. We hired a driver in-house and we said, okay, let's go move some freight ourselves. Let's see what problems this driver faces. And the first problem, the first natural problem was, where do I find freight? A lot of people don't talk about the fact that the first 3 months, for example, of setting up your authority, nobody wants to give you freight. Actually, back then it was just Uber Freight and Convoy that were willing to give you freight. So we wanted to make that as easy as possible. So we said, okay, well, when you first set up the authority, the first thing we need to build is integrations with these different brokers that are going to provide freight to people. We also decided that we needed to be the carrier because we faced a second problem, which is how do you get insurance? It's very difficult to get insurance when you first set up your trucking carrier. There are a few insurance providers that would actually provide you insurance, and that insurance is going to be like 20. I think for us in the beginning, it was like $24,000 per year. Like
Mhm.
I was wondering how anyone could afford to pay for that when they were setting up their trucking company. So that was the next thing, is like, okay, how do we set up this insurance? How do we make this as seamless as possible? And as we were going through this journey, it became clear that we needed to be the carrier. We needed people to actually sign on to our authority to just make it as easy as possible for them. And then we also needed to figure out, like, who is the right audience? Like, what is the right type of driver? Is it someone who has already been an owner operator and has their own authority and they're dropping the authority to come to us? Is it someone who's leased on to a different carrier? How do we even find these people? So we spent a lot of time in the first, those first 9 months, making sure that we had built a full platform. The other thing I wanted to make sure that we solved was payments. Cash flow is really, really, really critical for a driver. And, we realized that a lot of people would work with factoring companies. The factoring company might charge 5%, 3 to 5%. And we didn't want that experience for the drivers that we were working with. We wanted everyone to get their payments as quickly as possible. So we wanted to build like a full payments process. So we were one of those, startups where I would say we didn't build an MVP in the typical sense. We built an end-to-end solution such that from day one, when people joined our platform, we wanted them to actually get some value out of it.
And the crazy thing is, not crazy because you're so driven as an entrepreneur. You went from one truck on a platform to what, 500, 600 plus as of today,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that
Yeah. So
growth
600 plus now. Yeah.
is 600 plus in less than 5 years is incredible. And what was one of the biggest fueling of that growth? What do you believe was a factor that really kind of started driving that trend?
When we started the company, we had this tagline, because I was trying to capture what the value was, and it said, "More money, faster, with fewer headaches." So the more money bit, what I would say to drivers as they were coming on board with us was, look, we don't have shipper freight, but we've integrated with all these brokers. And there is a benefit to integrating with all these brokers, because if you're going out on your own and you have to search on platform one, platform two, platform three, platform four to actually find freight, at some point fatigue sets in. So you're never actually booking the best freight that's out there, because you can't search 20 different platforms to figure out what load to take. So that's the more money, is that by integrating these things and then building more and more tools over time, we can help ensure that you're making the right decisions. Faster is, we used to pay every driver within 2 business days. We kept hitting a problem where on Thursday, people would realize that they wouldn't get payment until Monday or Tuesday, depending on when they submitted proof of delivery. So we created a solution to be able to pay drivers in minutes. Like, you complete a job, we gave everyone a Visa card. It made it easier for us. We pay you instantly on that card, and you can go out there and spend the money, or you can transfer it to your external bank account. So the fact that we were providing people this cash flow benefit, I think, was a second thing. And then with fewer headaches, we were building more and more solutions to be able to make the entire operational workflow of being a driver as simple as possible. So I think those 3 things really resonated with people. The fourth one that I heard from a lot of drivers was, well, the fourth and the fifth, I would say, were freedom. So the fact that because people had all these tools now, they could operate the way that they wanted. We don't push any specific freight. You do what you want when you want, right? So that freedom to operate the way that people wanted was something that really resonated. And the fifth was something I had not internalized previously, and that was transparency. We were very transparent from day one. You see loads coming from different brokers. You see the name of the broker. When you book that load, we get the rate con sent to our inbox. We upload that rate con, so you see that exact rate con. But we also make it easier for you, where we take some of the data from the rate con and we put it in the exact same structure. So now you don't care who the broker is, because you know that for every single load, you have the data structured in the same way. But that transparency, I started hearing stories from people that some people were leased on to carriers where the carrier wouldn't give you the rate con. And I remember this one lady who joined us. She was telling me that the carrier would tell her that if she wanted to see the rate con, she had to come to their office to
Wow.
see the physical rate con. It's like, why is that even a thing, right? So I think at the time when we started, this transparency was a major problem. It still is a major problem in the industry, and that's something that really resonated with people.
So, the thing is and as we, pivot the conversation just a little bit, from, kind of the ideology and the thought process why an owner operator would typically want to go down that model. Many independent owner operators, they buy the truck, they start with the goal of running their own business, their own authority.
Yes.
But it could be that I later on down the road, I decide I want to lease onto a carrier, or I maybe start
Mhm.
off with leasing on a carrier. From your experience, and like I said, we're talking about 600 trucks plus. What is the main reasons why owner operators over the last 4 years, 5 years have made that shift?
I think it's really tough being an owner operator with your authority. In fact, I think people underestimate what the costs are. So the first thing I mentioned was insurance. Yeah, I remember there was a driver who joined us in the early days. He retired last year, and he signed up for CloudTrucks on the day that he had just gotten his authority. So he had been leased on for a long time to a different company. He saw a CloudTrucks ad or something. He signed up, but at the same time, he had just gotten his own authority and he was waiting for the insurance quote. And I had a conversation with him and I told him, look, I don't think it's a good idea for you to go out on your own. And here's why. Like, your insurance is going to be really expensive. You're going to be spending so much time on all this compliance stuff that you're going to find it really hard to drive a truck yourself. And he had two trucks. So he was operating one and he had another driver in one of them. And he ended up deciding to come on with us, and he thought it was a short-term decision. He thought he was doing it for 3 months. He ended up staying with us for 3 years until he retired. And I think, that's a perfect example of what people are seeing. The operational headaches of running your own trucking company are actually like much higher than people realize.
Yeah.
The insurance costs of running your own trucking carrier is also really high. I mean, for a long time, we subsidized insurance for all of our drivers, and we placed the bet that over time insurance would get cheaper for us.
Yeah.
And yeah, also, like, the larger you are, the more you can kind of spread the lessons across everybody, and everyone kind of learns from each other. And that's some of the things that we've been trying to promote as well as a company.
Do you find that most owner operators lease on by choice, or more is it often due to just the financial pressure of it?
I think it's a mix. I think it's a
Yeah.
mix. I think that the folks who I see who have been owner operators for a long time, lease on by choice. They've been owner operators. They've seen all the pros and cons of operating their own authority, and they decide at some point, I'm done with this. I'm done with all this paperwork, and then they lease on. We also see a number of people who, I would say, they're facing some financial pressure. A lot of times those people are coming from a different carrier. So they've been leased onto a different carrier. They've had different issues, whether the carrier is forcing them to do specific loads. And, over the past few years where like rates were really down, people really needed to look out for themselves. And then they come to CloudTrucks for that reason. So I think it's a good mix of things that we see.
So when you look at misconceptions, and that's one of the things that
Yeah.
you do hear some misconceptions when it comes to leasing on to your owner to someone else versus running your own authority. What would be your biggest misconception that you hear from your perspective?
I think the biggest misconception, I can't speak for other carriers, so I'll just speak for CloudTrucks. The
Yeah.
biggest misconception is that we make a ton of money per driver, and I wish that was the case. It would make life a lot easier, but that's not the case, right? So I get to see on a day-to-day basis things that are happening across the entire community of drivers that we have. And each individual driver gets to see just the thing that's happening with them, right? So, an example of this is a driver could have a breakdown, and they have a breakdown. It costs $5,000, and to them, CloudTrucks is a big company, and we should be able to just give them the $5,000 and they'll pay
Yeah.
us back. To me, it's like, hey, I'm not just thinking about this one $5,000 request. There might be 10 of them on any given day, and we have to be good and fair stewards of capital, and we also have to think about the entire community, and we have to think about the company, and we have to make sure that we're doing the right things. And in some cases we might help, to some extent, but we're not a bank, and we have to be thoughtful about that. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception. There are other things like safety, for example. I think I have my different gripes with how the safety scores work and all
Mhm.
of this stuff. But we always have to remind everyone that it is the responsibility of everyone. It is the responsibility of the entire network, because the best we can do is, if someone breaks the rules, we can kick them out of the community, but it's already hurt the rest of the community.
Mhm.
So that's something that I think about a lot, and I try to make sure that as many drivers as possible are really educated about these things.
From the data that you've seen, with CloudTrucks, is there a tipping point where it just financially makes more sense for an owner-operator to be leased on, versus staying independent? Is that kinda like an analysis that you typically look at prior to bringing somebody in?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's like a firm analysis that I look at. However, I think that for the vast majority of people, it makes sense to lease on. There is one case where I would say maybe you're better off on your own. So the only case that I found where you're better off on your own is if you have if you have like a contract or something that's dedicated in your specific region and it pays really well, then maybe it makes sense, right? Especially if it's something specialized that you're hauling or whatever. But when I look at CloudTrucks, the value that you get from being in CloudTrucks significantly outweighs the cost of being a part of CloudTrucks. Like I said, insurance is that very clear example where your insurance cost before you come to CloudTrucks could be 20,000, 24,000. If you're lucky, it might be 16,000. When you're with CloudTrucks, it's closer to 10,000, but it's not even a firm 10,000. It's 5% of what you're hauling, which means that your insurance costs, if you just think of the cash flow benefit there, you're only paying for insurance when you're making money. And that's a massive benefit to a lot of drivers. So I think that for the most part, especially with what we're building and what we've built so far, um, it's hard for me to see a lot of cases where it makes sense for folks to be completely on their own, because we are aggregating things. So the insurance benefit that I mentioned is one. The fact that you get paid within minutes as opposed to weeks at a time is another. You just look at the cash flow benefit of that. I mean, if
Mhm.
if you work with a factoring company, you're paying significantly more for that. They're the tools that we've built around dispatch, and we're doing a lot of work on AI to provide like best in class dispatch to every single driver. I have this obsession with the idea that every driver should have an assistant in their pocket, and that's something that we're building towards. So when you look at like the aggregate of all of these things, the discounts that we're getting at scale, right? Now that we're over 600 trucks, we're going to be in thousands of trucks by the end of this year. We just get more and more discounts, and we pass all of those discounts onto the drivers. When you just think think about all of those benefits, plus the fact that you're not having to manage all this paperwork yourself, I think it makes a lot of sense to be leased on as opposed to being on your own.
No, that's absolutely spot on, and love how you kind of just really saying, hey, you know what, we're going to attack these things that are just the common issues versus just being kind of an across the board. We're just leasing on as a company. And you mentioned a horror story earlier where it's like, you know what, we can't even see the rate con without going down to an office, which is absolutely
Yeah.
insane. So
Yeah.
if you think about somebody that's listening to this particular episode, for somebody just considering leasing on with any company, what are some key contract terms or some red flags that you would say to look out for as far as that may be a bad deal?
I think the very first thing is transparency.
Mhm.
Like that company has to be transparent. So look out for that. Make sure that or maybe just ask them directly. Do I get to see every rate con and every single load that I move? And the answer should always be yes. I don't even know if it's legal for the answer to be no. So I don't know how
Mhm.
people are getting away with this. So that's the first thing. I think the other thing that people should definitely look into is what level of freedom do they have. Are you allowed to haul loads with anyone that you choose, or do you have to haul loads only with the shippers that are contracted to move with that carrier, right? If you're only with moving loads for the shippers that have contracts with that carrier, then you need to know what the rate per miles are, right? Before you go in there, because you could be locking yourself into a situation where you are more like a company driver, but you have some additional work that a company driver wouldn't typically have. So you need to definitely think about that stuff. Um, yeah, I think those are probably some of the biggest ones, but I would say the transparency and freedom bit are really, really critical. The other thing to really look into is the financial stuff. So how fast do you get paid? What do you have to do to get paid? Are there any like hidden fees on getting paid? Things like that are really, really crucial. I try as much as possible to educate people on this cash flow. I mean, trucking is a cash flow game. If
Mhm.
you are not able to get money, quickly, you're going to burn through a lot of money just on fuel and maintenance and things like that. So you have to make sure that you're getting paid as quickly as possible without additional fees. The carrier should worry about whether the broker or the shipper pays them. You, as a leased on driver, should not have to take on that burden as well.
So you know that, we talked about leasing on can provide that stability, obviously
Mhm.
financially stable, operational controls, you have the stability there. And then the administrators, so you make it easy, making trucking as simple as possible. But it also means giving up a little bit of control, right? So when you think about that,
Yes.
what are the biggest trade-offs for that an owner operator should consider before they make that decision to where they say, hey, I'm going to lease on with a CloudTrucks or another company? What would that be?
The biggest trade-offs that people make are on compliance and safety, right? So with CloudTrucks, for example, every single driver that's on the CloudTrucks network has a safety score and a performance score right there on their app. Like they can see it right there on the CloudTrucks app, and we're calculating the performance score based on time pickup, on time drop off, and late cancellations. That's what we're getting judged by, by the shippers and the brokers. So we want the drivers to understand how they're contributing to those scores. And then on the safety side, we're looking at basically a lot of the signals coming from the ELD, right? So
Mhm.
are you going over the speed limit? Are you having harsh brakes, harsh turns? But we're looking at other things as well. So a bunch of signals to really come up with the safety scores. There are things that people get away with when they're running individually on their own. The likelihood that you're going to be pulled in for an inspection and all of that stuff when you have your own authority might be slightly lower versus when you're part of a bigger fleet, right? So I think those are the trade-offs that people really have to worry about before they come to CloudTrucks. Is, do I really want to operate safely, and do I really want to be really thoughtful about the on time performance that I'm being judged by? Um, I think that's by far the biggest trade off. The other thing is, what type of loads do you want to haul? right? With CloudTrucks, when we started the company, we decided to just hyper focus, and we focused on dry van. And we're still majority dry van. Now we allow flatbed, and we've started a pilot to see if we're going to fully open up reefer as well. But some people want to haul specialized stuff, and we just can't do that today because we don't have all of the operational steps required to really manage that at scale. And that's something that we always have to think about. And then maybe the last thing, it's kind of tied to the first thing, is when you're leased onto a fleet, you really have to care about the community. It's not just about you anymore, right? You are part of a community, and there are pros to that. You can get a lot of advice and feedback from this community. And I believe that a number of drivers at CloudTrucks have created community groups, and some drivers are teaching other drivers about how to be successful at CloudTrucks and how to be successful as an owner operator in general. But the downside, at least to some people in their view, the downside is, hey, you have to think about the community. You can't go speeding, on a highway going above the speed limit, because one, it's unsafe to do so. But two, if you get caught doing that, it affects the entire community, and not just you, right? So I think the best people to lease on are people who have that team mentality, who want to be part of something bigger. We're trying to build something bigger that we think will be by far the largest fleet in the country at some point in the near future. And we want to make sure that we're bringing on like-minded people.
I love the success behind it. When we hear the success from the growth, from, how people are being able to establish and be part of a community, which is certainly different when it comes down to that from that perspective. But I want to talk a little bit about something that nobody really wants to talk about. I want to talk about failures, because you have to see both sides, right? You have to see both
Yes.
sides in order to make the right decisions. Can you share some real world examples of owner operators who struggled even when they got on the platform, struggled
Yep.
and even lost their business due to just bad decisions? And what were those decisions?
Yeah, the biggest one we see is, when I look at data on people's success or failure with CloudTrucks and failure overall, you tend to see a huge drop off in the first 3 to 6 months that people
Mhm.
come on board. In the first 3 months, I would say the drop offs fall into two main categories. The first is a person who already had substantial debt before they came to CloudTrucks, and they came to CloudTrucks as a last ditch effort. Right? They're like, I'm already very close to losing my truck.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to make my payments. Like I said, it's been very rough the past 2 years, and they come to CloudTrucks and they hope that this is going to be the solution to all their problems, but it doesn't work that way, right? And so I see a lot of failure due to that, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in a moment. And then the second that I see in those first few months is maintenance issues. I mean, this is like by far the number one reason that people fail is their truck breaks down, and it costs thousands of dollars to fix it. They haven't set aside that money previously, so they can't fix the truck, and there's nothing we can do in those situations. So you know one thing, the advice that I'll give a lot of people, and the thing that I see the most, is one, you have to run consistently. You can't afford to not run consistently. And one thing that I see, one mistake that some people make, is they have a really great week, and then they take off the next week because they had this great week, but they forget that you always have to be thinking about your fixed costs and your variable costs, right?
Mhm.
So yes, you may not have those variable costs because you're not running, but you still have your fixed costs. You still have to make your truck payments, and for some people, they just fall behind, and when they come back on the road, they're not having those great weeks anymore. They start making mistakes, and it kind of spirals. And then the second is just not setting money aside. Like we now on the app, actually, we have recommendations for people, like, here's how much you should set aside on every single load for maintenance. So there's a dedicated maintenance fund, and you can see exactly how much is in that fund at any point in time. And actually, when you're getting paid, if you choose not to set that money aside, we remind you, hey, it's a really good idea to set aside this money, right, for maintenance. You should, at any point in time, have at least $5,000 in your maintenance fund. So those are the two biggest things that I see. I would say a third one is, look, at the end of the day, CloudTrucks is not for everybody, and this is something that I recognize. And in the first month or two, we see that some people struggle because we are part technology company, and everything that we build is a technology platform. And yes, we have a support team, and we have a business consultant team who reach out to drivers and all of that, but you still have to do a number of things yourself. You are still running your own business, and for some people, that just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to have to go on the app for a lot of things that you need. It doesn't feel right if you call in and we have an AI bot first answer the call and try to figure out why you're calling, so we can route your problem to the right team member. So, we recognize that that maybe it's not the best fit for those folks, and that's okay.
And I'm glad you hit on the fact about setting money to the side because, from my coaching perspective, I feel like one of the biggest financial mistakes that you can make in this business, that leads you to failure, is not
Mhm.
allocating that set aside money, that percentage of
Yes.
money that needs to, either you create your own internal escrow account, you do some sort of piggy bank, however you want to do it, but
Yep. Yep.
you gotta allocate those savings out, regardless of whether or not you a leased on operator, you run your own authority,
Yep.
even out here as a driver, just driving a truck. You need to make sure that you're putting money away, and it's not one of those
Yes.
things where you want to put yourself in a bad situation. And then you hit on the fact that, what, you got to run. And the thing that
Yep.
sometimes owner operators, and just really just small fleets in general, that freedom of entrepreneurship sometimes gives you more
Hmm.
freedom than you're prepared for. And what I
Yes.
mean by that is that you still got to run your business. You talked about the fixed and variable cost, and hey, you know what? Yeah, I made me a little bit of money this month. I can take off. No, this is not the opportunity to do that. We have to continue doing that. So, from your experience, and I know it might be a question that it kind of be baked in, but how often do owner operators underestimate the hidden costs of leasing on? Like, how often do
Mhm.
you see that as an issue?
Yeah, I think it's a big issue. Again, I'll give you some examples with us during the onboarding process. From the first call, the onboarding rep is talking to the driver about, here's what CloudTrucks costs. Like, we charge 18%. The 18% is for leasing onto us and all the operational stuff, but it also covers auto liability insurance and cargo insurance. But then they go on to explain, you also need to have your physical damage insurance and
Mhm.
your OCAC insurance, right? And then they tell the driver, hey, we also have access to trailers. If you need to rent a trailer, here's how it works. We rent a trailer for someone, and we sublease that trailer to you, and we do this to provide you this benefit because we realize that a lot of folks who lease trailers don't want to lease directly to owner operators. Okay, so we go through all of this stuff, and for some of the drivers, they're just excited to come on board. They come on board, and the first week they see charges for their trailer, and they see, maybe they elected to get physical damage through us and stuff like that. We're not making money on these things, and like we charge the driver. And then they say, wait a minute, you told me it was 18%. What's going on here? And then we have to start this education of, no, like, no matter where you are, if you're running a trucking business, there are these additional things you have to think about. Physical damage has nothing to do with us. It's to protect your truck, right? If anything goes wrong, you want to make sure your asset is protected. So I see that that's a very real issue, and it's something that we've tried really hard to educate people. And to be honest, like, we are spending more and more and more time on it, because we think that that is an area that a lot of people may not have as much understanding as they should. And you have a lot of people too who have really great understanding on this stuff, and they're really on top of it. But that's an area where we've seen that people struggle. And the other one is maintenance, right? The maintenance one is interesting because it's this cost that really, like, the way people should think about maintenance is every single mile you put on your truck, there is some cost to that mile that you've just driven.
Absolutely.
So you're almost prepaying, right? Like, when you're setting money aside, you're prepaying for this cost that is definitely going to come. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it's just not something that a lot of people think about, right? And people think that the truck will continue to be fine, but that's never the case. So yeah, we try to educate people on these things, but I think especially for people who haven't been owner operators for a really long time, maybe it's your first couple years or first 5 years of being an owner operator, a lot of people just don't have enough education on that stuff.
No, and I love how you talked about amortizing your expenses across the entire platform and across the
Yep.
entire balance sheet because, man, your truck doesn't know when it's time to make an insurance payment. Your
Yep.
truck doesn't know when it's time to renew, a tag or a permit. Your truck doesn't know when it's time to pay for it doesn't know any of those things. So
Yep.
every
Yep.
single time that wheel rotates clockwise,
Yes.
it is
Yeah.
allocating that across the entire vehicle. So I'm really, really
Yes.
glad that you brought that up because I think that's a hidden misconception that doesn't go into that calculation that people
Yep.
don't see and people don't really consider. So I'm glad you hit on that point. Now, just to shift just a little bit on the future of trucking, the future of where technology heads on into, CloudTruck offers kind of a hybrid solution for owner operators. How do you see platforms like yours changing the way that lease-on model is for the better of the industry? Because what do they say? Small tides raise all boats.
Yep.
What do you feel like CloudTrucks falls into that elevation?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I'm really excited about and really passionate about is how to ensure that owner operators are not left behind. There's this thing that I've always seen in trucking, and I saw it back in 2016, and it's still the case today. The brokers and to some extent shippers have best in class technology all the time, right? You see it today, like with what's going on with AI or any technology. Brokers tend to buy it first. They have more money to be able to spend on those things. The carriers, the large carriers, the mega carriers also spend on these things, but the owner operator is always left behind. So the owner operator is always at a disadvantage. They're at a disadvantage in every negotiation because if you're on the road and you're negotiating against someone who's sitting at a computer, the person who's sitting at the computer will always win because they have access to real time data. In the same way, when you look at the future, there's a lot of stuff that's going to change in the industry with all the AI tools that are coming out, that's going to amplify the broker. And what I'm excited about is making sure that the driver is not left behind, the owner operator is not left behind with this stuff. So, for me with CloudTrucks, our goal is to really provide drivers with three key benefits as we continue to go into the future. The first is best in class technology to operate their business, and it's across each of those areas that I mentioned previously, right? So more money, faster, fewer headaches. So best in class technology for those things. Anything that's out there, that people are working on, just assume that we are also working on those things for the betterment of the truck driver. The second that I've come to realize over time, this is not part of the initial plan, is that we provide a lot of financial benefits to the owner operator. And the larger we get, the easier it is for us to do this. So whether it's those discounts that I was mentioning earlier, or it's we have something called the Road to Independence program. So how do we help more truck drivers become owner operators if they want to, and how do we make sure that their weekly payments are low enough that they can actually afford to make these payments and continue to stay on the road. And then the third is best in class compliance, and whether that's us continuing to build a lot of tools on the compliance side, but also advocating in DC for things that owner operators care about. Like there are lots of rules that may not make sense in today's world that were there previously. I mean, I think about tools. I think about rules related to onboarding drivers, and and a lot of these things actually don't make that much sense for an owner operator when you have to get their past 10-year work history, but maybe the person was working for themselves for the past 10 years. So how do we prove that? So there are lots of things around there that I'm really really excited about. I think that the future of trucking is that more people will be owner operators, but I think that in order for this to occur, owner operators need to be in more communities. Being by yourself as an owner operator, running your own DOT, I think is going to be tough unless it's under the right circumstances. So we want to make sure that we are building that, like all the tools that are necessary for our community to thrive.
And that all just really kind of resonates from a standpoint of just from a business standpoint in general. Is just really, how do we elevate the community? One of my biggest goals is to leave the industry in a better place than I found it. And in order to do that, just like you said, it has to be the advocacy around education. They got to be the advocacy around those things that don't make sense. One of the things that I want to give you your flowers on is your entrepreneurial journey. I think that it's really one of those things where your passion to find a niche and to create better solutions has really, really turned into your success. And when you think about, you want to look at it as a compressed, entrepreneurship journey in trucking, right? 2019 to 2025 is not a very long time to go from one truck to 600 trucks. So reflecting on that journey, which has been an incredible journey for you, and hats off to you on that. You got a lot of people that are listening to this call that even if they don't want to go the owner operator route, right? They believe in entrepreneurial freedom, they believe in the American dream and the ability to be able to create a brand that resonates with yourself. What are some key lessons that you've learned that you'd like to share with the audience of trucking professionals listening to this call in terms of entrepreneurial success, regardless of whether or not that means partner with CloudTrucks?
Yeah. No, thanks for all of that. I think entrepreneurship it's hard. It's exciting and it's hard at the same time. And one thing that I learned kind of watching my parents over the years is that patience is critical. It's very hard to be patient, but patience is critical, and a lot of success is gotten from doing little things every single day, but maintaining that consistency, right? And some days it's going to be really, really, really hard to do this, and some days it's going to be easier. But if you work on the same problem for 10 years, you're going to be shocked where you get to 10 years later. So that's one of the key pieces of advice that I would give to anyone, and especially in those really, really, really hard, challenging periods, it's good to just remember that you're playing a long game, and you should just continue to take one step at a time and one day at a time. I think that the other thing, someone said this to me once, and it really resonated, is things are never as good as they seem, and things are never as bad as they seem. And this is kind of a lesson in maintaining some level of balance at all points in time. So when things feel like they're going really great and you can do no wrong, it's good to remain humble and remember that things are probably not truly as good as they seem in that moment. And when things are going really bad and it feels like everything's falling apart, it's good to kind of remain hopeful and know that things are never quite as bad as they seem. When we're going through challenging periods, we think it's the end of the world, but usually you kind of make it out on the other side. So maintaining that balance, maintaining that hope, and just keeping things moving every day.
Man, that's an incredible gem, and we're super excited to see the journey from 600 to 1,000 and 1,000 plus as you go. And you're really the unique thing about what you're doing is you at the end of the day you really care, and that's what it really boils down to. That the fact that you care, and I appreciate the fact that that you do that. I appreciate having you in the network. And you hit on a couple of things that I'm going to leave the audience with. Number one is hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. But you know what? You got to choose your hard. Getting up every day earlier in the morning is hard, but failure is even harder. So you got to make sure that you choose that. And the second thing, and most importantly, is the one thing I learned about the trucking industry. It has cycles. It goes up, it goes down. You never want to get too high on yourself, and you never want to get too low on yourself. The more that you can stay neutral upon it and really just stay the course, the better off you're going to be. So, Tobenna, it's been an honor and awesome having you here on the show today. Looking forward and excited to seeing you at the match 2025 this year. You guys going to be
Yep.
down there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely.
So super excited to seeing you down there as well. And for my listeners, make sure that you take this, like it, share it, join the Playbook community. It's a community where we're looking to focus to change the overall concept of where the industry is headed. And we're going to leave the industry in a better place than we found it. I hope you all have a great time listening to this. Tobenna, what's one way that they could reach out to CloudTrucks if they're interested?
Yeah, just go on cloudtrucks.com and you can sign up. You can learn more about the company that way.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Well, I hope you have a great day. And to my listeners, we'll see you on the next one.